I'd like to remind everybody to turn on their microphones and speak into the mic too as well, please. What do we have tonight?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This evening under work session, we have a couple of items to discuss. We wanted to bring back to the council the topic of water line replacement and also talk about what the different funding approaches would be. So tonight there's a presentation that will start off with Greg Rokos, our Public Works Director, to talk about the different water line replacement and what the needs are within the city. And then Sheila will also be discussing the funding approach. So Greg?
Thank you. This evening we're going to do this is basically, if you saw it from 2 years ago, the same presentation, just kind of updated the things that have been going on. So in the first slide, it kind of talks about the different assets that we have in the water system. We have, about 1,200, 1,300 fire hydrants. Just about every one of them should have a valve. There's system valves throughout the system. There's also places where at the end of a line we have to blow out the water, so there's a place where there's a release for that. We have 3 water towers. We have 1 ground storage building, or tank, you want to call it, and 2 pump stations that help pressurize the system. To give you an idea, I'm not going to go through all these, but it gives you an idea of all the different tasks that water services performs. So they're constantly busy doing every different thing, and it's just not fixing water lines that are broken. But there are a bunch of repairs, a bunch of maintenance, a lot of things that go on in the daily business of running the water department. So you can kind of see all the different things that they do. One of the maps that everybody wants to see is where are the water lines and what type of water lines do we have out there. So if you look at the green lines, those are our PVC, the plastic pipe that's out there. And those are pretty modern pipes, and we'll go through them looking at them later. We have ductile iron pipes. That's one type of iron. Cast iron, which is an old style iron pipe that's used. I've put in a slightly different color, the ductile iron that needs to be replaced. It's actually an orangey color, but on these monitors it looks yellow. Asbestos cement, that's a metal pipe that has asbestos in it. It's wrapped in asbestos. And then there's HDP that was used for a really brief time. It's a different type of plastic pipe that's out there. We have a total of 136 miles of pipe that's out there. And one of the ones that's out there is cast iron pipe. We have 22.13 miles of cast iron pipe. It's estimated to last 50 to 75 years. If you look at the picture in the bottom right, it gives you an idea of what a cast iron pipe looks like today. When they're put in, they were round pipes and they were perfectly clear. But over time, they rust from the inside out. It's an interesting process. And so the other thing is the weight of the earth also, and as they weaken, they become oval shaped until they break in the side. And then you can see in that picture on the left, you can see how the pipe breaks to the side and the water leaks out. Their estimated life is 50 to 75 years. The next type of pipe is asbestos cement. We have 3.58 miles of asbestos cement pipe. It's all located in one spot. It was left over from the military base. And its estimated life is about 70 years. It was constructed in the early 1950s is when they built the base and all the housing. So somewhere in there. So you can tell that asbestos pipe has reached its end of its life. We also have PVC pipe. That's 80 miles of it. It's the type of pipe that mainly that's what we use today until you get to a 12-inch diameter. After that, we go to ductile iron. Just because of size, you need that much thicker walled. There is thicker walled plastic pipe. We haven't been using it yet. Some communities start using it, but generally we use ductile iron for bigger diameter pipe. Its estimated life is 100 years or more. And then there's some HDP, high density polyethylene pipe that's out there. It was used for a little bit and really fell out of favor for most places. Just cost and efficiency, PVC pipe lasts and is a better product. Its estimated life is 50 to 100 years. Ductile iron, we have 28.58 miles of it. It's estimated to last 50 to 100 years. Age is not the biggest problem for ductile iron pipe that's in the ground. It really is the soil type that the pipe is in. What people didn't realize years ago when they buried ductile iron pipe is that a lot of the soil is acidic. And so that acid actually eats into the metal and eats pinhole leaks into them. I mean, they're very, very tiny, and they start leaking by just having a very, very small hole, and then you get several of those small holes together. It's basically like putting dots on a piece of paper. They eventually form a line, and it breaks. And so we're very careful now. We use ductile iron pipe. If it's in acidic soil, they now have a wrap. They wrap it in plastic, and so that the pipe doesn't come in contact with the earth anymore. So that was the solution to how to make ductile iron pipe last. But we do have some areas that we have ductile iron pipe in acidic soils. So one of the big things is our cast iron pipe. You hear a lot about our cast iron pipe in all these meetings. And you keep saying, what's the big deal about the cast iron pipe? Well, the cast iron pipe's life is between 50 and 75 years. The cast iron pipe that we have in the ground right now is between 60 and 80 years old. And so it fails, and you can see the side where it's rusting out, and it gets squeezed down, and it just finally just breaks. And also the people who have cast iron pipes, you may have gotten calls for brown water or funny tasting water, and a lot of that's just the cast iron pipe, because as the water doesn't pass by it very quickly, if there's not a lot of demand for that water, the water will actually sit there and absorb all that rust that it's around, and then when you have a demand for water, it goes through, and the people get rusty looking water. Normally when we get those calls, our water department goes out, and we go to the nearest fire hydrant, and we flush out the lines to get all that rust out that we can, and then hopefully they'll have to run a little water to get out of their house, and that the rust will go away. But it's still, I mean, you saw inside that pipe, it's still there. Cast iron pipes is a challenge, and when you start looking at breaks, when we talk about breaks, always people mention the first things. It's loss of fire protection, you lose water at your house, no drinking water, you can't flush the toilet, things like that. But the biggest problem with breaks is restoration. Restoration is a huge issue, because if it breaks, if it's a small break and it breaks behind the curb, and all we have to do is just dig up some dirt and some grass, make a repair, and cover it up, it's not a big deal. But if you remember over on 163rd Street, where it broke in front of the police station, we had to close the road, we had to dig out the road in a big area, and the restoration is where we get the money, because that water can travel a long distance. It's also, sometimes you dig where the water's coming out, and that's not where the break is. The water will travel and then come out a different spot, so you have to start digging. Sometimes you have to dig a rather big hole until you find where the leak comes out. So, but there's lots of different times. You know, we've all seen pictures of big breaks. That's a collapse after the water gets shut off. The ground got sent somewhere else, so the road settles out. And then these are not good things. Even in the wintertime, you have breaks. You can see the tree just covered with ice. And so we're out there, whether it's 100 degrees or 10 degrees below zero, water lines break. This is a picture, I believe, of a school or a hotel, I can't remember which, that you can see it could have been a $10 piece of pipe that got replaced, but there's lots of damage that comes from them. This is another picture of all the different pipes and the costs. Here's the breaks, and so this is the breaks from 2014 to 2019. You can see they're primarily on cast iron pipes, although every type of water line breaks. It doesn't matter what you put in, everything breaks you put underground, because when the ground freezes and settles, it has differential points where it just shifts, and when it shifts, it'll break, it'll snap with it, whatever in its way. In the last year, this last fiscal year, we kept track of every single break and took pictures of them all, and you can see it's primarily on the cast iron pipes. Although we've had, our biggest break last year was on a ductile iron pipe, and the water ran through a manufactured home, and I thought we were going to have to buy the home and everything around it, because we lost, I forget how many, 600,000 gallons in a matter of minutes that went through his home, if you can imagine that. The Belton water system cost to replace the cast iron and asbestos cement pipe back in 2014 is estimated at $26.5 million. In 2019, it's $27 million. And this last year, we estimated about $31 million based on what prices are right now. So if we add the ductile iron that needs to be replaced, that's another $6.6 million. To replace all three of those is $37.8 million in pipe. So, just so you don't think that Belton's unique, the United States has this problem with aging infrastructure everywhere you go. And so they estimate 240,000 water breaks every year in the United States. I mean, that's a staggering number if you think about all the different water breaks. Estimated cost of $1 trillion needed for the nation's drinking system. And basically, you want to try to replace it before you have the breaks that destroy everything that's around it, and you can have a good, reliable drinking system. So that's what I have. I'm now going to turn it over to Sheila. She's going to talk about finance.
Do you want to have them ask any
Do you
questions?
have any questions for me?
Okay.
Stunned them.
All right. Okay. So, as we talked about a little bit in our last meeting, we have options where either you can pay as you go or you can issue debt. And so, I did a little calculation basing inflation at 2.5%. We never know what inflation's going to be. I don't have a crystal ball. None of us do. And so it's just a guess. So I use 2.5% as the estimated inflation rate, and did a little calculation of taking the estimated project costs for the asbestos cement, the cast iron, and that ductile iron pipe that needed to be replaced. And the total amount in today's dollars is the $37.9 million. And then if you add inflation at 2.5%, you would add almost another $11.9 million. So the estimated cost over 20 years is about $49.7 million. The pros of pay-as-you-go financing, after I was laying this out, in my opinion, honestly, the biggest difference between pay-as-you-go and debt is the flexibility in the amount of project that you're paying for each year. Obviously, when you do pay-as-you-go, if your rates or your revenue source, whatever funding source you're using, does not total the amount that you thought that it would, then you just spend less money the next year and adjust accordingly. Where if you have debt, you have to make those principal and interest payments. It's just like your house payment. You have to pay it. Doesn't matter if you make the revenues or not. The cons are of pay-as-you-go is that you're paying a little bit at a time, so the project is lasting for many years. And in this case, it would last for the next couple of decades. And there's always a risk that the inflation could be much higher than 2.5%, and there's also a chance that the inflation could be a little bit less. If you saw in this, there wasn't a huge amount of inflation from 2014 to 2019, but then you look from 2019 to 2021, there's a higher amount because we're in a high amount of inflation today. It doesn't mean that will be that way in 6 months or in a year. We just don't know. So if you look at the debt financing, I basically did the same calculation, but I added our costs of issuance and interest, and my estimated interest rate is 2.5%. Again, that could fluctuate wildly depending on what happens by the time we're ready to issue debt. So those amounts could come down or they could go up. But if you add the 20 years of interest and the cost of issuance, you're looking at just over $50 million, which isn't a huge difference from the pay-as-you-go if you're calculating the inflation. And then the pros are that the project will be completed in much quicker. We would be able to replace it all probably in about 5 years. Then there's obviously less risk of inflation, and the cons are that there's an interest rate risk. There's going to be a spike staff workload. And what I meant by that is we have inspectors going out and inspecting all of the infrastructure that ends up belonging to the city after it gets done. And to have all of that work done in 5 years, pretty much all of their time is going to be spent on that. And so depending on what other building and construction projects are going on in the city, you're going to have quite a bit of increased staff workload in this short amount of time. So you might need to add staff, or definitely, but only for a short time, if that makes sense. And then with debt, there's additional bond covenant disclosure and tax compliance requirements. One of the things that you see sometimes required when you do debt is that you have to have like a 10% reserve, because they're worried to make sure that you have money, and if there's a risk of default. So our rates might have to be a little bit higher to comply with the bond covenant, but that is not calculated in here, in these numbers. So,
Go ahead.
Sheila, my question to you, I guess, about financing. We currently have a revenue bond or whatever we have with the water and sewer for our bond issue we passed here 7-8 years ago. And I know we're somewhat close to paying that off. I don't know how many, 5, 7, 10 years. Are we able to piggyback on that if we needed to, or can we? To extend that bond?
So those are SRF loans, and so we are not able to do anything. We are not able to do anything with those loans. We would need to vote all new bonds, and it would be completely new issues.
Okay, I didn't know if that was something, like some of our other bonds, we can do a no tax increase to keep the roads going and stuff like that. Didn't know if that was something we could keep this tax going and just extend it out to help replace the water lines, but you're saying no, we'd have to,
We wouldn't be able to, because these are SRF loans.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions about, so when I was looking at this, I really thought after I looked at this, like the biggest difference is that flexibility. Like that is what I see. I think Greg would see it a little bit different. He would say that the biggest pro would be that you would get it all done in 5 years, and he wouldn't be getting the calls of people that were complaining about their orange water and so.
When you say 5 years, why do you say 5 years?
Well, because it's so much work.
No.
That you want to talk about that, because I got that from you.
Basically, we're looking at probably 4 years of construction, but it take us 1 year to get it designed, so we can get to that point. And so that's kind of what we're looking at, how we would do it.
And additionally, we would have to decide when to ask voters, like if you did debt, you would have to wait until the election date. And then depending on if we were going to do regular revenue bonds, those could be issued much faster than SRF loans could be. With SRF, there's a different process. You have to get on their IUP list. That doesn't happen until December. Then you actually have to have the project bid before you can issue the loan.
Would you explain SRF for those that don't know what
So
you're talking about?
That's the state revolving fund. It is a federal program that is passed through to the states. Each state is allowed to add its own administrative fee. In Missouri, it's 50 basis points. So there is um, and I can't remember which table it's looked at, but like they add 50 basis points to that national index, and that is what I am basing that interest rate of 2.5% on. And we don't know, so let's just say that council decided that they wanted to issue debt, so they wanted to take it to the voters. The soonest that could happen would be in November. If that happened in November, then we could possibly get on the state's list in December. And then we would have to bid out the project. So the soonest that we could close on the loan would be in the summer. And so it would still take several months in order to do that. If council wanted to wait, nobody else would be voting on anything in November. There's nobody's going to have anything on the ballot in November. So if we had the only thing, there probably wouldn't be a very big turnout. So you might want to instead wait till April. If you waited until April, then we're looking at the following December, which still puts it the following summer, if that makes sense.
If you did this on bonds, would this count against the 20% assessed value that we can do for bonding?
No, these are revenue bonds. We actually will not, we don't have enough capacity in our GO bond to issue GO bonds for the water line project.
Chet.
If I go back to what Greg said a few minutes ago, it's going to take a year to develop the plans for this thing. So we really wouldn't know how to even bid the thing until we have the plans. So you're talking 2 years out, maybe, I don't know, whatever.
Yes,
right?
yes, and the other risk to this is we need to be able to spend all the money when we do a bond issue. We need to be able to spend all of the proceeds within 3 years. And the reason that we need to do that is to avoid it's called arbitrage. So our bonds that we issue are tax exempt, and the IRS, the federal government, is not collecting tax revenue on interest earnings. And so one of the things that they do is they put a constraint on people issuing those tax exempt bonds, and basically say, we're going to penalize you if you are holding on to bond proceeds for more than 3 years. So anytime we issue bonds, we need to spend all those proceeds within 3 years. Since we're talking about being able to do all the work in 4 years, we would have to do a second issue, which would push it even further down the road. And then you're looking at even more interest rate risk, because we don't know what's going to happen for the second bond issue. Well, we don't know what's going to happen for the first bond issue, but there's even more risk that's possible if you for that second one.
Go ahead.
How do we account for the cost of water main breaks and emergency repairs? I mean, what are we paying out that we don't anticipate each year, and what would that look like over 5 years versus 20?
So we haven't gone and actually calculated every water line break and what the cost is. There's a certain amount of time that we spend with it, because the actual break is not that expensive. It's really dependent on what the restoration costs are. So if we have a lot of them that are large restoration costs, the price is going to be much higher. And so I don't have a detailed list to say, here's what I've spent on every water main break for repairs.
And because it's a repair and not a replacement of the entire line, you're looking at it's buried in the operating costs, versus when we are looking at the replacement, that is pulled out and put as capital outlay. A repair doesn't necessarily increase and start over the useful life. It just patches over the line, and allows us to get to that useful life, if the original useful life, so it doesn't actually extend it, if that makes sense.
Not to add any workload, but is there any way we could, from moving forward, that we could probably get some type of rough estimate that, you know, I don't think we need down to the penny, but, you know, could we get this water main break cost 20,000, this one cost 80,000? Some kind of rough estimate.
Yeah, we could start doing that.
And hopefully we don't have to, but I'm sure we will with this nature. Go ahead.
I guess I didn't, pay as you go, how many years was it gonna take us to fix all the water lines?
About a little over 20,
Well,
if you
20 years?
if you add inflation. So here there are two. Okay, when we did this a year and a half-ish ago, I didn't have the ductile iron included in the price. Where Greg and I talked this year, and since we're kind of going through this, we know that ductile iron pipe, part of it needs to be replaced, and so we added that cost, and we didn't have inflation, and an estimate for inflation. And so with the estimate of inflation at 2.5% and the ductile iron, it would be like 21 years.
My other question for the new people here, we were told February, March, whatever month it was, that the federal program we're trying to do for Cimarron Trails is what, September, October?
That's correct. So what we're trying to do right now is we're trying to get a grant to do the Phase 1 assessment of Cimarron, and then get that information back so that we can then include that into the grant application that's due in October for the actual construction for the asbestos lines. That is an 80-20 grant through the EPA, and that is a highly competitive market, but that's our timeframe.
How much would that save us over that? I don't know how many miles we're out there.
Right, there's just under 4 miles, and so we'd be looking at a $1 million cost from our end, so it's about a $4 million project.
Okay, thank you.
Do these numbers include that asbestos pipe?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. I'm sure it's in there, I just want to make sure.
And do these numbers include the 108832 pay-as-you-go we had passed a year or so ago?
So
Or these are just raw estimate? Will we do away with that, or is this on top of that?
let me get to these. First, I just wanted to show you the difference in the project costs if you decided to do pay-as-you-go versus that financing. So we're not talking about any of the revenue funding sources yet.
Okay.
But I promise you that I'm getting to those on the next slide after we finish talking about.
I'm just questioning, would there be any benefit to looking at the worst pipeline in half of the bond issue to do the major stuff first? That would cut down the timeline as far as what we can get done. And then you still have to deal with the other issue later. But what I'm really kind of concerned about is the pipeline that we're really looking at. That it is by far the worst of the worst. The other ones are not going to be good. But what I'm trying to say is, can we go with $18 million and deal the worst of the pipelines and still deal that move us up from 20 years or to 10 years or whatever? I don't know. I'm just questioning. I don't know.
I would think anything would be table, I guess.
Okay, go ahead.
What I'll tell you is that there are certain ductile iron pipes that I know are really bad. That are, the one that runs along South Fork is one we're concerned about. The main that runs along Allen, I know we're getting ready to replace it. It's another bad one. But when you look at that break chart, in general, all those lines are breaking. So I couldn't tell you this one over that one over this one over that one.
Which ones do we pick? That are,
Yeah, you pick one, and then the one the next block over breaks, and people go, well, you didn't choose wisely, So it'd be hard.
Like your thought, but
My only question was, that, when you're looking at $37 million bond, and it'd be ideal to do everything, I would agree. I'm just kind of figuring, is there something that's in between here that we could address part of it, but then maybe not be able to afford the whole thing, if that's what my point
Right.
is.
go ahead.
Just a thought that I'm having as we're doing all of this. One of the things that we can use the 4.36 million for is this, if this is one of the things we choose. And Biden is still planning, saying that he's going to do an infrastructure, big rescue plan type thing come summer that would also possibly give money to this as well. So if we possibly jumped into the debt financing too soon, and then we could possibly have that option as well too. But we're still saying with the debt financing that it wouldn't be until November that we could even get on the ballot. So we would already know. Okay.
Well, it's probably a two-part question, Sheila. I know we got money set aside from last year's tax increase and some of the money that's going to be new for this year. So my question to Greg is, why can't we get started on design phase if we have some money? I guess my question is, what's going to cost for the design phase?
Well, I actually haven't gone out and started figuring out design phase costs. Usually, you can figure somewhere between 15 and 20% of the project is what you're going to pay in design. So
You're taking $5-6 million bucks in.
probably yes. And then
We don't have that right now.
No, I don't have that right now. And then the monies that we do have, we're looking at doing that public-private partnership to replace Allen and work on Allen 162nd Street. And then we would obviously go work on the ductile iron pipe by South Fork next with any resources I have left.
And I see Alan started already.
Allen, they're doing work on the gas line right now. That was for replacing the culvert. So they had to remove the gas line for us to put the culvert in, and now the gas company's there putting the gas line back in.
Okay. I thought that looked like new water lines going in over there.
That's the gas line.
All right.
Go ahead. Oh,
It appears to me that the PVC is the good line. Is that what you would replace it with?
Correct. For lines that are under 12 inches in diameter, it'd be a PVC pipe. Above it, be ductile iron wrapped in plastic.
So on your chart there, all that is the green is in the PVC. The brakes look like they're all in the iron there. right
Correct.
in the downtown area.
And then, just so you know, I was advised from someone behind me that the average cost that we have for brakes is about $2,000 for a small brake, but the big ones are about $50,000 each.
I realize the costs, the predictability, that it's just not there for the main breaks and the emergency repairs. But that unknowable is pretty important, I think, when you look at spreading this out between 5 years or 20 years, especially knowing a big break's running $50K. Looking at the map of breaks, water main breaks, could we kind of moneyball it and figure out what areas are subject to more like environmental stress, you could say? You know what I mean? Just thinking out loud. Yeah, because I don't envy you trying to triage that and
yeah,
figure
I
out
mean-
what's
I
most
mean,
important.
Yeah, which is worse, this break or that break? That would be hard to,
Hard to know.
yeah, that would be hard to decide. So, anybody else? Continue.
Okay, so to your point, Councilman Trutzel, that, would it be better this way or that way? So I drive myself crazy with those types of questions, and so
Me too.
I drove him crazy all last week because I didn't really know what to bring you guys because there are so many different options. And so, I don't know. I just finally settled on this option to say we're either going to do all pay-as-you-go or we're going to do all debt. There absolutely, you could break it up however you guys want to, but for this for this presentation, I did it this way, knowing that you guys can ask me to calculate whatever you want, and I'll do it, but then at least I don't have to decide what you guys want me to calculate. You guys could actually tell me, and then you guys can analyze it as much as you want. So the funding sources, whether it's pay-as-you-go or debt, you can use sales tax money, property tax money, or you can generate the money from rates and fees. I just want to say as a finance professional, because this is a proprietary fund, my advice would always 100% be that the proprietary funds are supposed to be self-supporting. They're supposed to entirely pay for themselves through user fees. And so as a finance professional, my recommendation would always be to fund this through rates and fees. That is just a recommendation. Recommendations don't really mean anything. You guys can decide however you think that it will be best to happen, because that's your guys' jobs. And I will never be offended if you decide something different than I advise. Unless I say it's illegal, and then I'll tell Patrick that he should advise you guys that it's illegal. But any of these ways, none of these ways are illegal. I personally, again, think that rates and fees would be best. Sales taxes, just a half-cent sales tax would generate about $2.2 million a year. That would, as we talked about last meeting, there is a capital improvement half-cent sales tax that is currently in place. It does sunset December 31st, 2028. And if the voters would choose to remove that sunset, you could use that money, either pay as you go, or you could use that money to make debt service payments. Property taxes, there is a little bit of room, 50 cents room, about in our general debt service levy. So if you wanted to impose a 50-cent property tax levy, that would generate about $1.5 million a year. And if you wanted to do rates and fees, obviously rates can be set at whatever they need to be set at to do the work. And so there's all kinds of flexibility with rates.
The sales tax and property tax would have to be voted on by the voters.
Yes.
Rates and fees could be set by us.
Yes.
Okay. Angela.
So I feel like this might be something that'll get you a little excited, because I know that we've talked about it before. Use tax, is this a possibility or an option that could be another funding source if voters approved it?
Yes. However, as I explained at the last meeting, I cannot calculate how much use tax would generate.
Mhm.
I know the county was kind enough to do a calculation several years ago, and at that time it was going to be about between $450,000 and $500,000 a year. That was, online sales continue to increase every single year, so the amount would be higher now. But I also don't know what was going on in the city the year that, as far as construction, because use tax is very volatile. It's not very stable and flat, and it can fluctuate wildly based on what kinds of construction projects are going on in the city. And I don't know what projects were going on the year that Cass County was kind enough to do a calculation for us. They were able to do that calculation because they do have a use tax. And so if they fluctuated based on our city code, they could basically tell me how much they got, and then I was able to calculate that.
So, can you remind me again, what percentage is basically online sales, and why is that affected by how much is being built?
When people purchase from an online retailer that doesn't have nexus to the state of Missouri, meaning they don't have a location in the state of Missouri, they are not required to collect sales tax. They are instead required to collect use tax. However, the city of Belton does not have a use tax. So for sales from those retailers, such as Amazon or Wayfair or Chewy, who isn't operational right now in the state of Missouri, a use tax would be imposed equal to the sales tax, but since we don't have a use tax, they're not paying anything to the city of Belton.
So you were saying, though, that it depends on how much was being built at the time as to figuring out. That's where I got confused.
Because a lot of people that are building, maybe not houses, but like, for example, the hospital expansion, or even the Southtown Commerce Center building, those typically they're not buying from somebody in Missouri, they're shipping them in from out of state, and so a use tax is subject on those construction supplies versus a sales tax being charged, and that is why.
So the bottom, excuse me, the bottom two things under rates and fees, the pay-as-you-go, that's what we have now, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then under that, that's on top of that, or that would be an alternative to getting rid of the pay-as-you-go we have now and going to debt service? I mean, 2.5 times 20 years, that's your 50 million right there, I guess. Is that what I'm?
Yes. So what basically I just said, when we proposed the 5-year rate increases, those rate increases were expected after the 5th year of increase.
Yeah.
Was supposed to generate $1.7 million each year.
Right.
But if you did the debt service, and that is knowing that if we don't make the $1.7 million one year, it's okay, we would just do less water line replacement the next year. Versus if we issued debt and we had to make those principal and interest payments, we would have to cover those. And so we would need to make sure that we generated the
Right.
principal and interest.
But if we kept what we got, then we wouldn't need nearly as much debt service. I mean, that's you said there's a combination all the way from 100% debt service to 100%
Yes.
pay-as-you-go. So
Yes.
the previous council already passed the
10%.
third one down there under rates increased, although I think we got rid of 1 year. But anyway, but that's a sizable amount, and so we'd only need to finance maybe $1 million a year.
No, we would need to do, so
Well,
here,
1.5 times.
here's the calculation
Oh,
that I
okay.
did.
Oh.
So I took out the first year, and so we've already done the 10%, so I took that out of the column, and I did a calculation of, the first column, Greg had a great suggestion, and he said, let them know what percent of their residential customers are at each level. So you can see that 4.9% of our residential customers have a minimum bill, and then 5.5% use between 1,600 and 2,000 gallons of water each month, and goes all the way down. Finally, 5.4% of our residential customers use more than 10,200 gallons each month. And so I took the rate increases for these 4 years and I added them together and compared to if we needed to cover that debt service, typically what we would do is we would divide the total principal and interest payment, divide it by all 8,200 customers, divided by, that's how much we would need a year per customer, and then divide that by 12 months because we'd be collecting it each month. And so that is how I calculated the $25.44 to make sure that we collected enough money to make those debt service payments, since there's no flexibility. Versus if we did it through a rate increase, you can see that only that it's less expensive for everyone except for the final 5.4% of customers there. That's why I did the breakout. I was trying to figure out where the break was, how much water you would need to use for it to be more expensive, and it broke out at 10,200 gallons.
Okay, I guess what I was saying is, I think it was voted down that, maybe it was one of those, I think the fiscal year 22, wasn't that voted down, the 8%?
It's been postponed.
Postponed, okay.
We postponed it until the cash carryover ordinance, which is actually on tonight's
Right, yeah,
agenda,
okay.
so that council can decide. The general fund is transferring part of the revenue that was anticipated to be generated from that 8% increase. And then we were going to wait until the cash carryover amount came, and then council can decide if you want to transfer the rest of the money from the general fund that's available to cover the revenues that were supposed to be generated from that 8%.
Okay, so what I was getting at is, the next to the last column is what we already have, and it's gonna generate, hopefully, 1.7 million a year. So that'd take, instead of 20 years, 30 years or so. So if we want to get it done in 20 years, we need an extra million a year instead of 2.5 million a year. So to finance a million a year will be a lot less. I know you're comparing totally pay-as-you-go versus total bonds, but if you had a combination that you added together, you'd probably only be at the top number at the bottom, only maybe $10 a month as opposed to $25 if you're, I don't know, I'm just doing it off the top of my head, but
Well, I think the question is last year the 10% raised what, $405,000. So on an ongoing basis, when you do 8%, 8%, 3%, 2%, when you compound it, it's going to generate up to $1.7 million when you compound it.
yeah, at the end of 5 years, we hope
Right.
to have that
Right.
going every
So
year.
our goal is to get, if we're going to do pay-as-you-go, our goal is to find money to come up to $1.7 million,
Yeah.
either through revenue bonds or through increases in the water bills,
Right, right.
right?
Either through taxes or
Some
rate increase.
financing, somehow we got to get to 1.7 as a goal.
If you're going to do pay-as-you-go.
Right.
It will need to be more than that if it's debt.
But it's still an increase of that water portion of the bill, so that whether it's debt or whether it's through a rate, it's still an impact to the end user.
Yes, but they also have the option of, instead of doing it through rates, they could do part rates, part sales tax, part property tax, part rates. That's where
so
I
many
got
options.
overwhelmed.
Yeah,
There's
so
so
many
many
options.
options.
Is this when we're supposed to talk about the options, or are we going to do that in 2 weeks?
If you guys can tell me, even if you think about it and send me what you want to see, I can come up with the illustration of whatever you dream up.
Well, I mean, I guess I'm part of the old guard here. I know for 2 years I've been saying the same thing. Personally, to me, I'd like to take some of the money we already have. And I've talked to you about this over a 2-year period of time and shrink our overhead allocation on the water side. I think we got $814,000 in there. And if we took half of that in 2020, what budget are we in now? 22 or 21? 22? So in budget year 23, we take 407, and in budget year 24, there's $800,000 going into infrastructure improvements. But I'd also like to investigate and go after a use tax that we talked about 2 weeks ago and make that specifically targeted for infrastructure improvements, which the first thing we're doing is replacing water lines. So if we can do revenue bonds and get it done in infrastructure improvements in 5 years based on taking money we have and then pass a use tax, I mean, I'd like to see us go that direction and use all that money towards the infrastructure improvements and starting with water lines and then working our way down to whatever else we want to do.
So how are you going to replace the revenue in the general fund that,
I'm going to guess we're going to keep having good years. I mean, I hope that we have, our sales tax this past year was up, how much? Almost $400,000?
we're estimating with Chewy coming in that it will be up for this budget year?
I was just talking about even last year, we were up, how much were we up in '21?
I
I haven't seen the
have to look.
final numbers. Have we got the final numbers for '21 yet?
Yes.
Okay.
And Councilman Clark, remember that we are, I don't know, you can't necessarily compare the prior year, this
The only
year
thing I
to
have
the
to go
prior
on
year.
is what we currently doing.
You have to, so each increase, we are counting on that additional revenue to fund things like the increase in the cost of benefits and the 2.5%, the one-step increase. Like the revenues in the general fund need to increase every year by a certain percentage to be able to cover all of the cost of employee benefits and keeping in operations, yes.
I get you.
So,
But I guess I'm expecting Chewy to generate enough money that we don't know what the other facilities are going to generate. I mean, we don't know what IPSI now, BoxyCharm, whatever.
I did calculate a little bit for that also. Chewy is made a huge impact. IPSI will make a very, very small impact.
Which one?
Small.
Which one?
IPSI.
IPSI. Well, that's where you can't generate a dollar figure for us because it's variable on the use tax. But if it's $300,000 a year, I mean, it's $300,000 a year going into infrastructure improvements. I mean, if it's $750,000 a year, that's even better. I mean, online buying is not going down.
As long as it's, yes. I would,
It couldn't be used for permanent employees. It should just be used for one time.
a
Pay-
use
pay as
tax,
you go, I
but,
guess, yeah.
but I'm worried when you start talking about reducing revenue, $815,000 from the general fund every year, how are you going to make that up? And if it's not generating, if you're just gambling and you don't have my fear is that we're going to gamble on something that hasn't actually materialized, count the eggs before they hatch, and then we're in a situation where we have to start laying off staff in the general fund. And I've lived through that, and it was not fun.
I mean, I sat on this board for 2 years, and I mean, I complained about the same thing over and over, the cost of water rates, and raising water rates is not something I'm going to support. So we either got to figure out a way to do it, or we're not gonna do it again. We're gonna keep doing what we did 20 years ago. We're gonna punt it. So we either gotta figure out the hard choices, and I'm not mad at you, I'm just speaking. We gotta figure out the hard choices of figuring out how to reduce the cost to the consumer and fix what we need to fix. I mean, and I'm not going after the sewer rates, because I think there's extra money in the sewer to maybe we increase the overhead allocation in the sewer fund to compensate that, because I know we got extra money in there. And we can figure this out, but I think the budget cycle for '23, we're working on it today. So hopefully, we as a council are giving you advice, what we want to see for next year and how we're going to attack this. And that's just my personal opinion. I can't speak for the other 8. But I think we got to come up with a way to fix our problems without actually going back to consumer every time and just raising water rates. And that's why I want to propose a use tax. Not going to cost me anything. I don't care. I don't buy online. So, I mean, the people that buy online, I mean, it's going to cost them. But as a board member, I look at these people driving up and down my roads that they're not paying for. So, yeah, I think we need to start charging those people some type of toll to drive on my roads, and that's the only way for us to do it is a use tax. So until Amazon or some of these other big corporations move into the state of Missouri, I think we need to look at that wholeheartedly.
And please, just like, I'm trying to be devil's advocate, I want to make sure that the council has all of the information in order to make the best decision. So I'm not advocating one way or another, I'm just trying to bring up things just to make sure that everybody's thinking about them, so.
Well, and one second here. I know I can't just take $800,000 out of the general fund because I can't replace it. And that's why I'm trying to do it in a 2-step process. You know, if we did $400,000, it's a lot easier to replace 400,008. And if I can do that over a 2-year cycle, I mean, I think sitting down and having meetings, I think we can figure this out. But we might not know the answers until September, October, when it comes time for that budget process also.
Correct.
Thank you.
Allison?
We have an estimate for this work going back to 2014. For my own context, can you tell me how that played out? Anybody who?
Can you clarify the question? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So we have an estimate to do this work dated from 2014. So I'm assuming this came before the council in 2014. Did it go to the voters around that time? How was this played out in the past? Because we're still playing with this puzzle.
Yes, so the staff came to council to ask for $400,000. I don't know where Don Tyler is. Was it $400,000 each year? So staff came and asked that $400,000 be allocated towards the water lines each year, starting in like 2014. And there was, because of all of the other improvements that needed to be done and the other work that was being done, and the fact that the rates were not generating enough money, and the fact that we saved quite a bit of money, and we did 2 large jobs I'm sorry, I should have brought my budget book. I'm looking at Councilman Powell's budget book. Okay, hold on. So we saved and saved, and in last fiscal year and the fiscal year before, we finally did 2 streets of water line replacement. And so just doing that $400,000 at a chunk, it's just not enough money. And which is why staff came up with the idea and the plan to increase rates so that we could start doing larger chunks at a time.
So kind of essentially since 2014, we've been attempting a smaller version of the pay-as-you-go plan
Yes.
with no rate increase going back to 2014, just what's already being generated.
The only rate increase was passed on from the amount that Kansas City, Missouri generated. So if Kansas City, Missouri increased rates, then we would increase our rates by the same percentage. And that generated a little bit of money, which helped us keep up with the additional operating costs each year, and then generated a little bit of money towards capital.
Okay.
And that's what they did at that time. So I've heard before my time, but as I heard and has been regaled to me, what came to the council that year, 2013-14, was a rate study that had been performed, and information came back from that report that the then Public Works Director, wasn't Greg, but the then Public Works Director recommended a 60% rate increase in order to address everything that was going on with the water system. And that's where some different discussions then occurred and came back, even though they were suggesting $1 million at that time, that's where they settled on the 400,000 that Sheila just explained.
Lori?
Okay, so we're sitting here and we're talking about, we don't want to raise the water rates. This is what we've talked about that caused a lot of the problem from previous years, that the city absorbed and paid the 2% or the 3% that Kansas City charged and or the sewer district charged. So we have to remember that we cannot absorb a 3% increase from Kansas City or a 2% increase from the city cannot absorb that, because that's why we're in part of the situation that we are now. So we are going to have to raise rates, which we have done the last couple of years, exactly what they charged us. Is that not right? We didn't, like if the Kansas City was 3%, we did 3%.
Yes.
If sewer was 2%, we did 2%. So we talk about a use tax. The voters have to vote to agree on a use tax, which they did not do before. The bond, the voters have to agree to a bond, which the numbers that we've gotten are going to be approximately $25 a month for, 20 years, which they have to vote on that. We have to remember that they have to vote on that. If they decline and they vote no, where are we? I know we don't want to raise the rates, but we have to stop and think, if we don't at least do the pay-as-you-go, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. That's just my 2 cents worth. And I know that we've got this transportation thing, possibly some money coming. We don't know how much from Biden's, hopefully, if he can get it through. But that's still, if we get some, that's awesome, and we can put it towards where we need to put it. But we have to stop and remember that we got in this mess. We're looking to the voters to approve $25 more a month on their water bill. I personally can't see anybody approving that. When you look at our bills, what it would cost us. Or I don't know, I just think we need to remember that we have to do what a lot of the citizens are not going to be happy, I'm sure, whichever way we go. But we're still going to have to raise water rates and sewer rates down the road. My 2 cents.
Do we have a contract with Kansas City?
Yes.
Is that yearly increases spelled out, or is that a yearly thing they hit us with?
It's annually based on the vote of their council.
Okay. Angela?
I think the answer to your question, Lori, is that if we try everything, we say, okay, guys, and we put all this information out to the citizens and say, we can do, we are in this meeting, but we push it other places with, getting the word out so that people actually know. We can do a use tax, we can do this, and we let them actually decide. And if they say no to everything else, and all we have left is to raise the water rates, then we raise the water rates. We have to do it some way and let them tell us what way they want us to do it.
But we have to raise the rates no matter what. Every year, we have to raise the rates. We cannot absorb 52 or however many households.
I'm not ever saying not, if Kansas City raises water rates, I'm fine with that, because we gotta pass on the cost. I'm
Right.
saying to fix our problems, I think there's other ways that I'm trying to help generate to fix our problems. Last year, we did 12 and 12, I believe. We did 12% water and 12% sewer. That's more than 2 and 2.
Right, but I just want the citizens to understand
Yeah.
that when we're trying not to
No, I'm
raise the
not
rates.
saying if Kansas City charges us another 2%, we pass that on because that's a cost to us. I'm just tacking on even more to that.
Right, but if they vote for a bond, that's gonna be on top of that. So, and I understand, but it's just, we have to remember that we're trying to fix things.
Honestly, Lori, I miss Councilwoman McPeak. I'm still mad that 20 years ago, we didn't finish this project that I thought we started. So, we punted this 20 years ago. I sat in that chair where Councilman Kraft is sitting right now. We sat here and had the same conversation. And they had a plan in place, and politics got in the way, and I forgot what happened, but, we gotta finish the project, and I'm with that, but I think we gotta figure out how to do that without the least amount passing it on to consumer, and that's my goal.
And I don't wanna see us kicking this 20 years down the road, because it's gonna be twice as much, 3 times as much 20 years from now. Rob?
Just a quick question back on this, so make sure I understand the cost anyway. The next to the last column is after the fiscal year 25, we will still be generating $1.7 million a year. And the final column is starting as soon as the bond is passed, we will be generating $2.5 million a year. Is that true?
Yes.
So those are apples and oranges there. We would, if we really wanted to get this thing done in 20 years, that next to the last column would have to be even more. We'd have to go out 2% or 10% or whatever through 27 or 28, or I don't have the calculation in front of me, obviously, but those are 2 different things, and both of them are expensive. You're right.
Yes, and so again, there's flexibility with the pay-as-you-go plan. When we presented this to council about a year and a half ago, we said, let's start out with these rate increases and then we can reevaluate. You don't know what will happen based on additional customers. It could be that these rate increases, depending on, the growth in the city, end up generating more than the $1.8 million or $1.7 million. And that also is a benefit of pay-as-you-go, because you have that flexibility. You can just keep reevaluating each year instead of locking yourself into the bonds. And so, by the way, not to add more confusion, but this is the 20-year bond option. You could actually repay those bonds in 30 years. You could reduce your principal and interest payment. However, it locks, it makes it so that your
interest would be more.
Your interest would be more, but you're also looking at fixed payments for 30 years versus only 20 years. So again, there are so many different options, and if you guys tell me what you want to see, I'm more than happy to answer what your vision is instead of making me come up with every single vision, because it was overwhelming.
Anything else?
Yes, and I did give you guys a packet. It's each of your guys' water bills 4 times the current, what it would be based on the 5-year proposed rate increase that was presented a year and a half ago, based on the paying back 20 years of debt service on bonds, and then also just if you voted that you wanted to go ahead and pass the 8% increase that has been delayed and will be brought back to you guys to vote yes or no on, I guess at the next meeting, just so you would have the information of how that would affect each bill.
Any other questions?
I have one thing I would ask, Sheila. A simple question that I think of is, as we're growing in commerce in Belton and it's all coming here and rooftops and businesses, where does this extra money go? Is there any that we make from sales taxes and what have you that's being generated from them coming? Is there any way we can show that the people that we're getting this much extra, we're applying it to help put in the water lines or something? Because I think a question I would always have is, what are they doing with all the money they're getting from Chewy or such? Why can't that be used? Just
Yes, and all of that information is in the budget, but you have to compare from year to year, and you can see that the very first time that the general fund has grown substantially in years was this current fiscal year estimate, and it all resulted from Chewy. The sales that we're estimating will come from Chewy are almost double our current largest sales tax producer. And so all of the growth in previous years has been so minute that it was all gobbled up just from the annual increase in our operating expenses. Finally, with the revenues that we're anticipating coming from Chewy, we were able to add very much needed positions to the jail, dispatch, a detective, firefighters, and then after that, after adding those back, really that money is going to be gone after that, because now we're adding to our annual payroll expense and then the increased cost of benefits. I know it seems like a lot, but this was the first year that I wasn't crying when we were trying to balance the budget.
thank you, Sheila.
Anybody else? Okay. With that, we'll adjourn the work session and call the regular meeting to order. May we have a roll call, please? Oh, we gotta do pledge allegiance. Councilmember Powell.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, now can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Larkey,
Here.
Councilmember Savage, Councilmember Powell, Councilmember Trutzel,
Sure.
Councilmember Kraft,
Here.
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Goff,
Present?
Councilmember Lawson,
Here.
Councilmember Peak.
Here.
Personal appearances, we have no personal appearances tonight. Consent agenda, one motion, non-debatable, to approve the recommendations noted. Any member of the council may ask for the item to be taken from the consent agenda for discussion and separate action. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, can I have a voice vote?
All in favor?
Oh, all in favor? I'll
Aye.
get it.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. All right, regular agenda. Motion approving the first reading of bill number 2021-28.
An ordinance amending Chapter 11, Health and Sanitation, Article 4, Solid Waste, Section 11-106C of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Belton, Missouri, to update the service charge billing rate from $15.61 per month to $16.21 per month.
Present.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I second. I'm assuming this goes in effect July 1? Is that when we changed earlier? July 22nd, okay. The only thing I would say, yeah, 60 cents increase 2 years, pretty good. I have a brother who lives outside the city. I think he pays about $30 a month, so. Yeah, I'm good with it. The other thing I will mention, Mayor, is being here for the last 2 years, and Councilwoman Peak and Savage and Trutzel can probably talk more about it, but the service I think we've been getting over the last 2 years has been exceptional compared to what I experienced for only about 3 months in my first 3 months on the job. So Councilwoman Peak and Councilmember Trutzel and Savage could probably talk more about the prior, but no, it's been, I think WCA's done a good job, and very few complaints, if any.
Councilmember.
Yeah, can I ask where we're at in paying off the initial trash can purchase?
We have 2 more payments. They're annual payments. We have 2 more payments, one coming up very soon and then one the following year.
So it'll conclude next spring, summerish.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. B, a motion approving the first reading of bill number 2021-29.
An ordinance approving the reappropriation and revision of the City of Belton fiscal year 2022 adopted city budget.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Looks like $986,000 or something like that's going into the rainy day fund. And then, I didn't go through all those line items, but we had a lot of, looks like almost $1 million that's being transferred from 21 to 22 for projects or purchases that didn't get made.
Purchases that may have gotten made, but the delivery didn't occur before the end of the fiscal year, so we're carrying those over so we can make the payment in some cases. And in some cases, just because the purchasing process didn't get completed yet, but is in process.
Are we as a city experiencing delays in products that we've been trying to get that because it seems like we talked about cost. I mean, I couldn't imagine if you're trying to cost what lumber is going to, if you were trying to do something 6 months ago with lumber and you're looking at it today. I mean, I couldn't imagine if we're doing water lines that way, and that's why, to me, I'd rather do it earlier. But I don't know, are we having issues getting trucks or anything that we've ordered?
Things were delayed for different reasons, so part of it was just COVID. As far as the Munis and Intergov ERP system, that was because we're pushing that off until after the state audit. The state audit is creating a lot of additional work, and so we don't have time to go through a software, what do you call it, when you transfer the, no, it's, it's way more than training. We have to take all of the history, or several years of history, and we have to convert, it's a conversion. So.
Did Greg want to add anything?
Yeah, to specifically answer your question, Councilmember Clark, when you talk about are we getting delayed in our vehicles, yes, we are. Due to the chips, there are some vehicles that we've had to wait for that specifically impacted Public Works. We were fortunate enough to get our police vehicles, and so we've done that. We've been switching over the equipment on those, but from Public Works, some of those have been delayed.
So I guess my question, I mean, we've been approved for a new fire truck. I don't want to put Chief Sapp on the line, but have you ordered that? I mean, it might take you a year to get it, it sounds like, if the way things are going.
Right now, the estimate is 12 to 18 months. Yeah. We have not ordered it. We are close to finishing the spec process so that we can get some pricing in and make that decision soon. So I can almost guarantee the fire truck won't get paid for. It's going to have to carry over next year because 12 to 18 months right now is is the estimate.
Okay.
I plan on having an ambulance in front of you soon. The bids close tomorrow, and that one may get delayed. We've been encouraged to hurry because they're suffering from chip shortages as well, and weren't sure they'd even be building ambulances at the end of the year because they think they'll be out of trucks.
I was just trying to figure out, man, we're transferring $1 million over that, of stuff that we budgeted in years past, and we're not buying stuff. I'm just trying to figure out why, but,
Various reasons.
Yeah, various reasons, and as Sheila's already alluded to, many of the reasons were, as we talked about with looking at the software system, we deferred a lot of purchases because we didn't know what the impact of the pandemic was going to have on us this last year. And so those deferrals are now, now that we've seen and we're coming back out of the pandemic, more comfortable in looking at being able to make those purchases. So we're carrying over those funds so that we can continue the process of operations.
Any other discussion?
I was thinking that council might want to discuss at this point. So, Councilman Clark, you had talked about, well, it would be good to know for the next meeting, but you wanted to wait until we found out what the cash carryover was in the general fund.
well, I mean, I'd like to see somehow some of that money being used for infrastructure improvements. I mean, I don't know exactly how we take it because it's not an ongoing number. It's kind of like what we did earlier when we took the 240,000 and I think the 175,000 that me and Councilwoman Davidson did, kind of worked on it and moved that into the infrastructure for the water lines, but I don't know.
Okay, so here's what I was thinking. Just for, so in the fiscal year 2022 budget, we were anticipating that the 8% rate increase would generate $464,000. The original plan, we had hoped that it would generate $476,000.
8%?
The 8% increase.
But 10%, is that because we didn't do it in time last year? Okay.
Okay.
Because it only did, what, 405 you said, so.
Yes. So, when the council adopted the budget, they already transferred $196,000 from the general fund to the water fund to be used for infrastructure. So that means that the water fund is still $268,000 short to restore the budget, or $280,000 short to restore to the original plan that we had projected. So if you wanted to reduce the $970,773 that is going to go into the rainy day, reduce that by $268,000 or $280,000, we could transfer that amount to the water fund to be used for infrastructure.
I guess my question, going backwards, I thought we did two different things. We transferred the 240 that was an overage over the last 3 years into that water fund, and then we took like 175,000 from the general fund and put it in there, which in my head, I guess that's 415,000, but.
That amount was in the prior year's budget. So the amount that was in the fiscal year 22 budget, the amount that you're saying is 175,000, I'm gonna say it's $196,000.
So you're saying the 240 was actually in last year's budget?
Yes.
Okay. Because in my head, it's all the same money, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're saying we could take 270,000 and make that the whole for the year, then that would work, but I mean, we got 8 other people who got to decide that, but
Correct.
yeah. I'd be good with that.
So I would,
That would get us to that 460,000 you're talking about?
if you did $268,000, we would get to the 464. If you did $280,000, it would get us to the 476.
And kind of pick up a little bit from last year?
Yes, we'd have additional money. And then if you still chose to do the 8% rate increase, we could also put that towards water lines.
So what you're requesting, would this fund that 8% that you're talking about?
It would generate the funds for this year only, 8%, but you would still need to do the 8% and the next 8% the following year, because it's supposed to be generating each year and building on itself. Yeah,
So what you're saying, we overfunded last year then?
you did.
Okay.
All right, with that being said, the motion on the floor is just to approve
So do we make
the
a
reappropriations that is presented.
amended motion to put 268, was it 268?
Or would that be cleaner to bring that back next?
If you tell me
meeting?
what to do, I can just change it, and then you can do the final reading with it changed.
And it will just state as amended on the bill title.
I'll do the 286, is that the higher number you said?
280.
280? I'd make a motion, or do I just
We
tell you
that-
we would do
we
280
it
next time?
Next week, next meeting, or do we do it now?
Well, at this point, the motion before you is to read the ordinance as it's written with all that money going into the cash carryover, or until the rainy day fund, whatever the line item is. The cleanest way that I view it is a motion to amend the ordinance to place
280.
$280,000.
$280,000 into the, what fund?
From the general fund to the water fund.
For the purpose of,
Infrastructure improvements. So I make a motion that we amend the motion to transfer $280,000 from the rainy day fund into the water fund for the infrastructure improvements for the 2022 year budget year.
good enough for me.
I have a question. What Patrick said was general fund to water fund, but we're changing it from rainy day to water fund?
It's general fund rainy day.
Flash?
General funds rainy day.
Okay.
So we have a motion to amend.
Second.
We have a second.
Thank you.
We have any discussion on the motion to amend?
I just had a question, since we don't have a weatherman to
Is-
explain
is-
what the rainy day fund's all about, but what are we losing by taking money out of the rainy day fund? We're just guessing that there won't be as many rainy days? I don't know.
Well,
How much is in the rainy day fund right now?
nothing. After you vote on this, it would be 970,773 less the 280, whatever that is.
The 970 was what we had last year, just carrying it over this year because we didn't
Yes,
spend
we
that
got
much last
rid, we
year.
have no rainy day because
We don't have a
the
budget yet.
the council voted to transfer all the extra money to the water fund and bring us down to the 15% reserve, minimum reserve. So that got rid of all of our rainy day.
Okay.
When we did that, we still have the 15% reserve, but it got rid of anything over and above. Then, so now we have the 970, 773, but we would reduce that by 280.
Right.
And so what we would use that rainy day for is, let's say that, that the economy tanked and our sales tax revenue or other revenues in the general fund weren't coming in. That money we could then use, so we didn't have to stress out so much about revenues compared to what we were budgeting. Also, let's say that we had something like the AC unit on top of City Hall broke and needed to be repaired immediately.
Yeah.
We would be able to use the rainy day for that.
Okay.
Anything that wasn't included in the budget.
So in the last 5 years, have we ever, in the years that we did have a rainy day fund, did we ever use it for anything? Or, I mean, what's our history with this fund?
Well, sometimes something will happen where we have to do a budget amendment that wasn't planned. And so we have sometimes used it. We
Okay.
did not use it last year.
Okay,
And I don't believe that we used it the year before either.
okay. Then
I guess
I'm-
my
I've no
question
problem.
or my statement to that, Councilman Powell, would be, I've been here 20 years ago where our finances weren't so good. And we were amending the budget throughout the year to make sure we stayed above 15%. So, I mean, if we got down to a bad economy or something like that, I think there's always stuff we can modify to keep us above board. I mean, we don't purchase vehicles, we moved $1 million. So, I mean, there's always stuff in a budget I think we can go back and modify if we had to.
Any other discussion on the motion to amend? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Back to bill number 2021-29 as amended. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. C, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2021-30.
An ordinance authorizing and directing the mayor to execute the Fourth Amendment to the tax increment financing contract between the City of Belton, Missouri and Herman Enterprises, LLC for implementation of Project 3 of the Southtown Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Plan as amended.
Present.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Do we have any information that we need?
Mayor, I'd like to provide a little bit of background to you and City Council.
Go ahead.
All right, okay, thank you. So yeah, I just wanted to provide a little background. The Southtown Plaza TIF it's one TIF district but it's comprised of two separate developers. Each has their own contract with the city, and each are responsible for their own project area and contract. So what is in the agenda tonight, and you can see a map on page 117 of your agenda of the project area map. So projects area 1 and 2 are Menards, and they are part of the Southtown Plaza TIF, as is Herman Enterprises, which is the project area 3, but that is not what we're discussing tonight. Only project area 3 for Herman Enterprises. And the first building in Project Area 3 has been constructed, and that is the Aspen Dental. It is a non-sales tax generating business, and City Council authorized that, but with the condition that the second building generate retail sales. And the construction deadline for that second retail, or that second pad site is actually May 31st of 2021, and the developers requested a Fourth Amendment extending the construction deadline date. And Mr. Rob Herman is the developer. He's unable to be here tonight. He has asked me to extend his apologies, but he has supplied me with some information that I would like to read to you from him. And so he states, on December 27th, 2020, Aspen Dental opened their new facility offering full dentistry services to the general public in Belton, Missouri. Soon thereafter, Herman Enterprises, LLC began aggressively marketing the second building site south of the Aspen Dental building known as 705 East Markey Parkway. The landlord will only lease to businesses that coin sales tax in their ordinary daily business operations for the 705 Markey Parkway building location, which is pad site number 2. Commitments for small shop space for a proposed 6,000 square foot multi-tenant building have been slow and stalled due to the current pandemic. Only one tenant has expressed interest for 3,000 square feet of space that contractually expired. Very recently, inquiries for building space have increased due to the lessening pandemic restrictions and economic recovery. The landlord is marketing the site electronically on LoopNet and CoStar databases while cold calling and engaging email blasts to prospective tenants. For lease information will be added to the Aspen Dental monument sign located at the southwest corner of Markey Parkway and 163rd intersection for hard corner advertisement. Herman Enterprises will not spec build unless 50% of the space is leased but does anticipate possible construction beginning in the spring of 2022. And so that concludes his update. I think it's important to note that this developer has no reimbursable costs and does not benefit by the extension of this TIF plan financially. There are two entities currently being reimbursed for the costs of public improvements, and that is Menards and also the City of Belton. The City of Belton is being reimbursed by this TIF for Markey Parkway and the extension of Town Center Drive, as well as the Nexus Trail that runs through the Menards, or alongside Menards, and that leads underneath the highway over to the park. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Sid Douglas is here, our economic development attorney, and Sheila's here to answer finance questions as well.
Councilman Clark.
Carolyn, that's not on this project, but is Menards, when's their agreement up?
So that is May 21st of 2022. So
Okay.
this same time next year. And I've been in contact with them. Obviously, the pandemic slowed them down considerably. And, but I have reached out to them and told them all of the great things that are going on in the city, which they were happy that I had done, because obviously they're based out of Wisconsin. And I told them, you know, City of Belton's experiencing some growth.
I haven't been to all their local areas, but I've been to a couple of them, and they're doing some outbuildings in Independence and Olathe, and I know our numbers aren't as big as there, but you would think you would see some of those same type of retailers coming out to this place. I'm just trying to see if they're actively trying to do something with that property. It just seems like their signs down and it's being mowed, and that's about it.
Yeah. They are actively working on filling up the pad sites or the outlots. They are. The pandemic has slowed them down, like I stated, but I'm happy to give them another call tomorrow. And
I just want to make sure they are doing something, or at least actively trying, so. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion?
Question.
Go ahead.
Is this something we evaluate every year, like exactly a year from now, if Herman has done absolutely nothing, can we say, well, let's move on, or?
That's the question
Well, it
probably
would
for
be
you.
subject to his TIF contract. I would say that, as Carolyn explained, the city is actually receiving reimbursable, or is receiving some of the special allocation funds for its own project costs. So from the city's perspective, that might not be the best route to try and terminate or do anything like that regarding this situation. But yes, these do come up, and Carolyn does provide quite an extensive report every year regarding the progress of all TIFs in the city.
Okay.
Go ahead.
What is the penalty if this isn't approved?
Sid, would you like to speak to that? Thank you. It's red. It's on.
Red, okay.
Yeah.
The penalty would be that the developer would be in default in the contract, but much to like what Patrick just said is the revenues that are being derived from development of that area goes to reimburse the city, as well as costs that are incurred related to the Menards development. This contract also holds their feet in their agreement to develop the property with sales tax generators, which was the original plan. And so to the extent that there is a default and you want to deliver notice of that and terminate the contract, then the developer pretty much will be free to develop the property however they want, obviously coming back with any kind of planning or zoning changes that might be made. So I don't think there's really a great incentive to do anything or to terminate the contract that be an advantage to the city.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other discussion? One of my questions was, you answered it, Carolyn, about what kind of traffic they have, what their anybody interested in it, could you get a better report in the future for us on that? You know,
From Mr. Herman?
Yeah, you said they had one that fell out of contract, and then you said there was some increase. Can you get a better report for us in the future?
Yes, I
Maybe
can.
in a month or two, and see
Yes.
what's,
I
that
will
was one of
keep
my
you-
questions, and
Yes.
you answered the other one, but I can't think of what it was. I'll think of it in a minute, but go ahead. Chet?
In relationship to this, we had kind of the same situation with the Price Chopper property. And it's been several years before there's been no development in there. But we've got a different developer in there now. And we're starting to see some movement in there. So, you know, some of these things take longer than you would hope to have. But finally, we're starting to get a little movement there that he's already got one plan for the car wash, and another one I think is going to be for the old Mexican restaurant. And I understood he had another one planning for down there farther in the shopping center. So again, some of these things take longer to get done, and even though nothing's happened right now, that doesn't mean that if you give these developers a little time, that they won't happen in the future.
I did remember, thank you, Chet. I did remember, can you explain the Menards, why Menards is getting reimbursed, what they did for the Menards part of this, so people can understand that if they don't understand that?
Okay, yes, so.
Briefly, roughly, you know, not.
Sure. So Menards constructed public infrastructure, and as did the city. And so the public infrastructure and the other costs that have been are coming in, they've been certified. They've been approved. And so for those costs that were already pre-approved, they are being reimbursed.
Okay. Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. D, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2021-31.
An ordinance repealing ordinance number 2020-4561 and terminating the declaration of local emergency in the city of Belton, Missouri.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Do we have any information that you want to
Yes.
give us?
Mayor, this came to light due to the CDC changing their instructions regarding individuals that have been vaccinated and reducing that requirement. Right now, currently, city buildings have been face mask required. With this, if anyone has been vaccinated within the last 2 weeks, or before have both their shots, and at a minimum within the last 2 weeks, they'll be able to come into City Hall without their mask. We are still going to ask for people to practice social distancing to be on the safe side. And so that is a process that will change internally within city departments. Go ahead, Patrick.
And functionally, under the city code, whenever the mayor declares a state of emergency, the city council is required to, as soon as possible, approve of that declaration and then can authorize certain authority. Ordinance 2020-4561 was the city council's approval of the mayor's recommendation and declaration of a local emergency due to the coronavirus pandemic. At this point, and again, as Alexa said, due to CDC guidance changing, some of the authority that was granted within that ordinance is no longer necessary. Also of note, the city has not utilized, or the mayor has not utilized any of the authority granted under this ordinance in a pretty significant period of time. I do believe since the maybe amended stay-at-home order in last year. So it's also, it seems like from staff perspective and legally, that if the authority's not going to be utilized, it's time to, repeal that ordinance and repeal that authority that was granted to the mayor through it.
Go ahead, Councilman.
My only question is, I don't think we had 4,500 ordinances last year. I mean, this is 4561.
Yes, it's a rolling number, So we've had a total, at that point, we had a total of 4,561.
Also, beginning of the city of Belton?
Oh, I think it goes back to somewhere in the 60s.
You just changed
Oh.
the year.
I always thought it stayed with the year and what number, like this one's 2131, but
The bill numbers stay with the year.
gotcha. All right,
Ordinance are rolling.
thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Move for a second reading.
Motion carries. We have a motion for a second reading. We have a motion and a second for a second reading. Any discussion? Seeing none, that would be a roll call.
This motion would be a voice vote. The next one would potentially, if this motion passes,
Oh,
then it
that's
would be a
right.
roll call.
Yeah, you're right. All right, sorry, voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. Motion approving the second reading of Bill number 2021-31.
An ordinance repealing ordinance number 2020-4561 and terminating the declaration of local emergency in the city of Belton, Missouri.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none?
Mayor Larkey,
Yes.
Councilmember Savage is not here, sorry. Powell? Yes. Trutzel?
Aye.
Kraft?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Goff?
Aye.
Lawson? Peak.
Aye.
That motion carries. Do we have any council liaison reports? Go ahead.
Mayor Larkey, I'm gonna fill in and hopefully I can do as good as our last park liaison, but I was asked by the park director today if I would, until we get our official park liaison, to talk about some of the issues going on over at the park right now. The good thing is, starting on June 3rd, Farmers Market's gonna be starting up at Memorial Park. I think it goes from like 4 to 8 or something like that. 4 to 8. I forgot to write down a time, but I thought I read it. On June 5th, we have the Hy-Vee Summerfest. There's going to be a lot of activities going on June 5th. So we're going to start out with the parade. If you're interested in being in a parade, line up at the middle school from 10 to 10:30. Parade's going to start at 11 o'clock, go down Main Street to the park. Starting at 12 o'clock, they're going to have a cornhole tournament, 2-person team. Cost is $25, sponsored by Brewbakers. Over at our disc golf, they're going to have Rock the Lake disc golf tournament. I also saw something in there about Little Tykes tractor pull or something like that. So there's something there for the little guys and gals. At 9:30, we're going to do fireworks. So 9:30-ish. If you like fireworks, come out and watch the fireworks show. 2021, they're also going to do what they call summer theater in the parks. On January 25th, they're going to have a production called Once Upon a Time. And then on Saturday, July 31st, their production then is going to be Songs for a New World. To learn more about the parks, go to Facebook page, Belton Parks, or their website. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Mayor's communication, I don't have anything. I was going to talk about what he talked about because I went to the meeting the other night, but since he was quick to jump in, I let him do it. So, city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. In light of discussing the park department, wanted to add a little bit to that. We believe the city's received notice and the council will be seeing an ordinance coming to you at the next meeting that the city is going to be receiving grant dollars to do work at the Ives Reed building, which is also our senior center. Those funds will be coming through Mark through the Division of Aging. And as I provided to you previously, we did finally receive that notification that will be for window replacement, flooring replacement, and newer tables for the facility. We are working with the park department now. There may be a need to replace the roof at that location. With all the rain that we've had, we're having some, we believe that we are having some leakage there. They're getting ready to look and assess the building. So the dollars that were put into the budget for this year for senior center improvements, which were originally planned to go for the flooring and the windows and the tables, looks like that funding may now need to go for a roof, but more information on that to come. So we also are working with Mid-America Regional Council to try to create, and working with the Cass County Health Department as to what an opening date would look like for senior congregant meals. We believe that would not commence, though, until after the work is done on the building. So that will be a little bit longer than we had originally forecasted, but once we have that information and have more meetings with Mark, we will have a date for you regarding that. And that is all I have for the council tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any council have any communication? Council members, I'm sorry. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to enter an executive session, discuss matters pertaining to legal actions according to Missouri State Statute 610.021.1, and the record be closed and the meeting adjourned from there.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second.
Who was the second?
Dave Clark and Chad Tretzel.
Thank you.
May we have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Larkey,
Yes.
Powell, Trutzel,
Aye.
Goff,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Peak, Lawson, Kraft.
Aye.
That motion carries.